Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and I'm here today at Morphy's with a Colt model of 1919 BAR. This is the first version of Colt's commercial production BAR that they wanted to start up like immediately after World War I. The patents that were filed for the BAR's relevant technical elements were filed during World War I, but they weren't actually made public. These were considered secret patents at the time because there was this concern that Germany could get a hold of the gun, or potentially the patents, reverse engineer it, build their own BARs, and the US would lose a not insignificant tactical advantage in small arms. Now, there's talk that that's the only reason why the BARs were held back from use until the last 6 weeks of the war. That's not really true, but this was an element of concern, and it was specifically why the patents weren't made public. Now, Colt was manufacturing BARs for the US government during World War I, and they also, somewhat reluctantly, were willing, they were talked into basically granting a license to other companies to also manufacture them. Winchester and someone else whose name escapes me at the moment. So the condition, though, was that as soon as the war was over, all the patent rights reverted back to Colt. They thought this was a significant commercial opportunity for them, and they didn't want to just give it out as freebies to other manufacturing companies. So November 11th, 1918, the Armistice is signed, the war is over. Colt's priorities kind of have to immediately shift. There will be a massive reduction in military spending. There are a ton of contracts that got canceled at the end of, well, basically right after the Armistice was signed. The US didn't need all of these weapons that it was tooling up to use for a planned 1919 offensive. And Colt, of course, is concerned about its ongoing business. It knows a lot of stuff's going to get canceled, and one of its plans is we're going to start offering the BAR to military and commercial export sales because we think a lot of other people are going to be interested in this thing. And so on November 21st, Colt's patent attorney, CJ Ehbets, writes to the US Patent Office and says, hey, could you please unseal our patents? Grant them, lift the secrecy, stipulation on them, because we really want to offer this commercially. We want to be able to keep making it. If all this stuff is secret and we can't do it, then we have to fire a whole bunch of workers rather than keep them productively occupied. So, can we have our stuff back now? And in a remarkable turn of promptness that we'd probably never get today, the Patent Office responded to him 2 days later in the affirmative. They said basically, yep, it's the formal documents in the mail. They telegrammed them yep, it's all yours, go ahead. So Colt immediately begins working on the commercial version of the BAR, which would be the model of 1919 as they defined it. In the factory, it was designated the Model U, but everyone knows it as the Colt Model 1919. And that's what we have here. Now, I have a piece of it. Unfortunately, this gun was originally a Colt model of 1919, a Colt Automatic Machine Rifle model 1919. Unfortunately, someone has rebuilt the gun in basically World War II configuration. They put a carry handle on it, they threw on the bipod and the flash hider, which is unfortunate. This is a recovered gun in terms, it was a bad condition gun that's been rebuilt into something workable. Unfortunately, it's not rebuilt into exactly what it originally was, but I still think this is a good opportunity to tell you the story of it. So here are the markings on the top of the receiver. You can see this has been refinished. This has had a rough life somewhere, but we have Colt Automatic Machine Rifle Model 1919, caliber 30, and that's the main designation there. Then we have Browning's patent, Colt Manufacturing, serial number here, Charlie 100284. These guns actually began at serial number C100251. So this is a very early example. And these markings are pretty distinctive. It's hard to mistake them for anything other than a Colt 1919 commercial gun. Now, happily, we have a lot of Colt sales records, and we know that the first sale of a commercial 1919 BAR took place on April 11th, 1919. And there would be 1,003 sales through the end of 1923. Now in 1924, they introduced a new pattern of commercial BAR where they added a pistol grip, basically following in the tradition or following in the footsteps of what FN was doing with the gun in Europe. All the European countries were like, yeah, this needs a proper grip on it instead of this rifle-shaped thing. So Colt followed on in 1924, and we know from their sales ledgers that there were 1,003 of these guns sold between 1919 and the beginning of 1924. Now, what you don't see here are a couple of the little details that made the 1919 model distinct from the 1918 military ones. You also see several elements that have no place on the original 1919, like the carry handle. So the 1919, as sold by Colt, didn't have the flash hider cone, flash hider tube cylinder of the 1918s. It just had a muzzle nut on it. Obviously, it didn't have any of the 1918 A2 upgrades, like the magazine extension wings and such. It has the original 1918 pattern sight. The fire control mechanism is safe semi-full, which is how a BAR ought to be. The one major change that Colt did make was they relocated the recoil spring. So in the 1918 guns, in the US military guns, the recoil springs are located concentric inside the operating rod here, down into the gas tube, which wasn't a great plan, but for an automatic rifle, it makes sense. When you try and press this into light machine gun service and this gets hotter, then it runs some issues. The Russian Degtyarev light machine guns were the same way. The initial design had the recoil spring down here, and like the Degtyarev, well, predating the Degtyarev updates, Colt moved the recoil spring from there to the buttstock on the commercial 1919 models. Much better. The Europeans, FN, would do the same thing. Unfortunately, this one, like I said, has been rebuilt, so I can't show you that because this one, the recoil spring's still up here. But that was the main mechanical difference. Now, what's interesting about this is they also offered the 1919 pattern BAR in kind of any caliber you wanted that would fit into the basic overall length of the magazine. So 30-06, obviously, but also 7.92 Mauser, 7mm Mauser, 7.65 Argentine, 6.5 millimeter, and this is a particularly interesting one because of the 1,003 of these guns that were sold by Colt, 700 of them were in 6.5 millimeter, and they were sold to FN. So these are clearly guns that FN sold to a European power, probably a Nordic country, but I don't know exactly who, in probably 6.5 by 55 millimeter Swedish. So Sweden or Norway, probably, but I don't have data on exactly who got these things, but they got 700 BARs from FN. FN at this point wasn't yet tooled up to manufacture the BAR, so they just bought the guns from Colt and then reshipped them on to the end customer. So that actually accounts for 70% of the commercial Colt 1919 total production run. The other 300 are in a mixture of these other calibers, including a couple dozen of them in actually 303 British, which were obviously sent to the UK, and those were used for British light machine gun trials, which would eventually result in adoption of the Bren gun, the adaptation of the Czech ZB26, ZB30 system. But the Brits did experiment with a 303 caliber BAR, and those were Colt Model 1919s. I understand why this gun was rebuilt in World War II configuration. That's the classic, the one that everyone recognizes, the one everyone wants to shoot. But to me, this is potentially a really good opportunity for someone to rebuild this back into the actual Colt 1919 commercial configuration. There were only 1,003 of these made. Very few of them survive today in the United States on the registry. They're rare guns. I think they're a really cool little niche look at what Colt was doing in the very early post-World War I years. So I would love to see whoever ends up with this gun put it back into that configuration. But of course, in its current config, it is a fun shooter, as are all BARs, frankly. So big thanks to Morphees for giving me access to this one to take a look at and to show to you. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching.